5 minutes, Senator.
Thanks very much, Garryhinch. And I too, like other colleagues, am glad that Minister Simon Harris is here today to discuss this important issue. Flooding may have abated for the moment, but it's certainly not gone away. It will be back, and a hard rain has fallen, and it will keep coming back until we address it and until we deal with it with some purpose, with some vision and serious, sustainable and long-term strategies. Present company excluded, I want to say in relation to my next comment, I'm surprised, Garryhinch, that we haven't been drowned and flooded for a second time with the amount of crocodile tears that have flooded the country for the last month and 6 weeks, with people who are talking out of both sides of their mouth, people who are being dishonest to people and telling them that there can be quick fix solutions, people telling them that it all can be sorted with flood defences, dredging and drainage. In fact, in some instances, the drainage works itself of the past have caused the flooding on others and on their neighbours and on other land and adjacent properties, towns and villages. For certain, the flood defences worked in Carrick, as Senator Dennis Landy has outlined, and they worked in other towns in Clonmel and in other towns like Fermoy. But for certain also, they cause flooding further downstream. We see it on an ongoing basis in relation to the Shannon. You solve a problem in one spot, you open up the sluice, the weir, the dam, and you flood Cork, or you flood Athlone, or the towns down further. We have to stop being selfish and stop pretending that this will do, and this is the answer. There are people playing to the gallery on this, Minister. There are people who just want to make an electoral and political football out of it. But we cannot deal with this. There's been some very good ideas here today. I want to thank Senator Fidel Mihiel-Eames, Dennis Landy and other colleagues here have come forward with some good suggestions. And I'm glad you're here, Minister, because you are a listening minister and someone who will take them up and try to implement some of them. But we must have an holistic approach. I think that in some instances, I don't agree with you, Minister, that it's just a natural phenomenon, that it's just a matter of climate change. Some of it is man-made. We're causing some of the flooding ourselves. And in some cases, it's state agencies themselves who are responsible. As other colleagues have said, the ESB have a role, OPW have a role, Quilta have a role, National Parks and Wildlife. But it seems to me that in some instances they do not sing off the same hymn sheet, and they certainly don't cooperate and assist and support each other. In fact, in some cases, some of their objectives and purpose are at odds. And we must address this. We had a situation where it was clearly shown during the flooding, at the height of the flooding, Bord na Móna themselves were draining bogs and pumping water already into a flooded Shannon basin. Now, what's the sense in that? I propose that Bord na Móna should be taking the water from the Shannon and flooding the cutaway Midlands bogs as wetlands, as habitats, as reserves, and as a safety valve. As a safety valve for flooding when it occurs. And I want you, Minister, to address here today the issue of Garryhinch Reservoir, which we have pursued here for the last number of years. Garryhinch Reservoir is a feasible and live proposal. It's a valid proposal. It's a sustainable proposal. But Irish Water have rubbished it because it doesn't suit them. They want to build a pipeline from the Shannon direct to Dublin. That is short-sighted and it's stupid in the extreme. We need a reservoir to have redundant capacity and to address situations like the flooding and to have an overflow situation. Also, Minister, what if there was contamination at source during flooding times? As we have seen very often with floods, you have contamination of debris and sewerage. What then with your pipeline? With no safety valve, with no reservoir. And on the other side of these weather extremes, we're going to have droughts. We have to build in capacity so as we have redundant capacity for farming, for families, for factories and for foreign direct investment. I'm glad the Irish Times have supported my campaign in this regard, and they said it's a fallacy to consider building an 800 million pipeline from the Shannon, a water pipeline, without including the reservoir. So I want you to address that, Minister, and to ensure the public that it's a live prospect, it's still under consideration, and it will be a matter which will be addressed by the next government, not by Irish Water. And also we have to be honest. When this project was first mooted, some of the people who are now crying crocodile tears about the Shannon Basin being flooded turned to me and said, "Not a drop of our water will you get." Where's the sense in that? Can they not see beyond their noses, their own political catchment and their own constituency for electoral purposes, and go beyond that for just once and see the common good and the common purpose? We must, Minister, have a holistic approach. I don't agree with the Taoiseach and the government that we shouldn't have a single Shannon entity and a Shannon authority. At least we must have everyone working to common purpose. We must have a catchment approach from source to sea. And I would urge you, Minister, to actively pursue the reinstatement of agencies such as the Barrow Drainage Board. We need to restore and re-establish such entities where the local authorities along the expanse of the river, from Laois down to Waterford, and Carlow and Kildare and Offaly and everywhere in between, cooperated. And that in itself used to address the issue of bank maintenance, dredging, and, Minister, we had workmen from the local authorities, the outdoor staff, out maintaining the culverts, maintaining the drains, making sure the shores were unblocked. We have stopped all that kind of work in a rush towards laying off council staff and in a rush towards privatisation. Whose responsibility is it now to keep the shores, the culverts, the cuts and the tributaries clear? Very often what you have is a situation that the flooding is caused by man-made impediments. Bridges and weirs not being maintained, culverts and shores not being kept open and cleaned. We all have a responsibility in this regard. We've got to stop pretending. Because for certain, Minister, your heart would go out to the families who had to endure this all through the Christmas and New Year period. How stressful it had to be. And only for the intervention of volunteers and great organisations like the Fire Service and the Civil Defence, people would certainly have been far worse off. But, Minister, there was scope for improved cooperation between the agencies, between the local authorities. Some parts of the country were not affected or not as badly affected. I believe they could have deployed fire tenders, civil defence personnel and pumps to the areas worst affected, Cathaoirleach. So I do think we have to have a little bit more joined-up thinking. This problem is here to stay unless we take a sustainable, long-term strategic response, Minister. And dredging, defences and drainage alone will not do. Climate change is here. We have living proof of it. And it's not all down to nature. Man has had a role in this, and we can at least intervene in a positive way. But, Minister, there's no point in Bord na Móna doing one thing and the ESB doing the opposite, and Irish Water saying it's nothing got to do with them, and everyone else involved as well. Thank you, Cathaoirleach.